Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another podcast. Today, we are going to be doing or reviewing or talking about the race that just happened about half an hour ago, the 2024 Hungary Grand Prix, and what a interesting race. There was a lot of banter between teams and drivers and teammates that is definitely going to be the major talking point of not only this podcast, but for the next few weeks in F1 news. So, on that note, let's just go ahead and hop into it. I want to take a quick note about qualifying. Sergio Perez. Checo Perez. If you weren't in the hot seat, you are now, because you have crashed in Q1 yet again and not even able to take part in the rest of qualifying, and I don't know what else to say. I really don't. I don't. And at this point, I'm pretty sure that Checo is going to get demoted over the summer break, and I don't think there's really anything that he can do to change that, I guess. I think the damage has been done. You know, he crashed out in Q1 again for, I think, like the second or third time this year, and he did it back-to-back years, because he did it last year as well at this track. But Checo, I don't get it, man. And I looked, and I guess, so I think there was like the weather was changing slightly, so the track may have been a little bit damp. And I watched his onboard a little bit, because at first I was like, I looked at the crash, and it honestly looked like either like he got a puncture or like something broke before he lost the rear. But, and I mean, I even listened to like the throttle input and all of that, and it just seems like he lost it, and I don't fully get it. I kind of read an article after qualifying, and about him talking about it. He said that he like went a little too over on the edge of the curb, and where it was still pretty damp, and that made him lose traction and caused him to lose the rear. Either way, it was a mistake that no one else was making. I mean, the only other driver that had a huge mistake was Yuki Tsunoda, but that was in Q3, and it was because he went wide and onto the AstroTurf. But everyone else handled the changing conditions perfectly fine. So that's enough about that situation. In my opinion, Perez's hopes of keeping that seat for the remainder of the year is done. I mean, I have a strong feeling that he's going to get demoted. I've already talked about that whole situation, so I will leave it at that. But to end off qualifying, we saw a McLaren 1-2, which I don't think a whole lot of people were expecting. I mean, even McLaren, or even the top three drivers between Norris, Piastri, and Verstappen were all within a tenth of each other, which is very, very, very close compared to where times have been. And I am so sorry if you hear gnawing or chewing in the background. My dogs are sitting right behind me, and they decided that right now is the perfect time, both of them, by the way, to chew on bones. So if you do hear that, I do apologize. I don't really want to be that. I don't want to be rude and tell them to stop. So I do apologize in advance, but hopefully I can just keep talking over it and so on and so forth. But anyways, back to the race review. So, another thing about the qualifying performance. George Russell had a pretty horrid qualifying session and started 17th, I want to say. 16th or 17th. So, pretty bad qualifying session for Russell. But, yeah, that was pretty much the only main things that happened in qualifying. On to the race. Pierre Gasly started from the pit lane due to changing some engine components, which I will touch upon that really quick. What the fuck is Alpine doing? Like, how is it that the last two races, Pierre Gasly has taken engine penalties and started in the pit lane and not even completed both races? I mean, last race at Silverstone, he didn't even start the race. And in this race, they had to retire the car due to, I think, a hydraulic leak or something like that. So what the fuck is Alpine doing? Like, they were looking so strong, like they were, coming back and they were getting some decent points, but now they have just gone nowhere. They have just completely disappeared. Their pace is nowhere. Their reliability is obviously a major problem right now, but so on and so forth. I mean, I don't even get how Alpine can be just really good for like two races and then just absolute dog shit for the rest of the season. So, but we saw that. No other major talking points. Russell and Perez started on the hards to go long in the first instance, and there was a few drivers that started on the softs to make up some positions. But as the field went down into turn one, or even got off the line, Norris got a pretty good start. He got in the first half of the start. I think he was the best one that got the start out of the top three, and he went to go, obviously cover off Piastri, but in the second phase of the start, Piastri was able to keep alongside alongside Norris and sneak up on the inside of turn one, which was pretty crucial to his race. And then Verstappen was going to try and make a move on the outside, and then Verstappen, being Verstappen, just completely went off the track, avoiding contact, obviously, and kept his foot in it and came back on the track ahead of Norris, which that's a big no-no. And it was under investigation, but Red Bull pretty much told Verstappen, hey, you got to give that place back because that was not the right move. And let me say this something real quick. Verstappen was on one today. I mean, we have not seen Max Verstappen this heated and this frustrated in a very long time. And I would say his emotions and his anger got the best of him today because he was not driving like he was, or he's a 3-time world champion. He did not look good. He did not look comfortable. I mean, he was saying that the car was very understeery, which he absolutely hates. And, the strategies were really fucked. So, he had to really be pushing on his tires. And it was quite funny that the conversations between Max Verstappen and GP, his race engineer, about how the race was going on. And, Max was complaining left, right, and center, like, this car is dog shit, like, what the fuck, like, why did you give me this car, like, what is going on, and all the way to the point where, when was it? When, I think it was when, at one point, Verstappen was, going or trying to make a move on the outside of the exit of turn 2 into turn 3, and Hamilton pushed him wide, kind of like, Hamilton was on the racing line and took him, shut the door on him, and Verstappen was like, oh, he didn't leave me, or what did he say? He's like, I guess you don't, or I guess you don't leave like a car's width anymore, or something like that. And GP legit came back onto the radio, and he's like, yeah, but you have to be within half a car length. Like, you have to have your front wheels alongside half of his car to be anywhere close. And Max is like, yeah, whatever. Like, just the banter between those two, like, they are very cut and dry with each other. They don't sugarcoat it. They don't, try to feed each other bullshit. They will say what's on their mind, and it's fucking hilarious. Like, GP was not having it, because he was so fucking tired of hearing Verstappen complain about the car and complain about how bad it was. And then it kind of came to a point where Verstappen got very... This is where, like, his emotions really got the best of him, because he sent a move on the inside of turn 1 on Lewis Hamilton, completely outbraking himself, causing major contact between him and Hamilton, which saw Verstappen's rear end of the car up in the air and slam back down on the track, which how either one of them got away with no damage is beyond me. Especially, I thought Verstappen would get at least some like gearbox damage or something like that, but no, he just kept on going. Anyways, Max came on the radio, was bitching and complaining about it, and GP's like, look, I'm not going to have an argument over the team radio. It's very childish. Like, we'll talk about it later. Like, he was not having it. He's like, Max is like, shut the fuck up and finish the race type of thing. But as of right now, that whole incident is, I'm guessing, still under investigation, but it would not surprise me if Verstappen did get a penalty for that, because it was Verstappen's fault. He sent a move down the inside, which he was close, but he was still pretty far back, and, he locked both of his front wheels up, which caused him to go straight on and looked like pretty severe contact. It was severe contact with Hamilton, but both cars were just like, no, it's fine. But yeah, we look at Austria, and the slightest bit of contact ruins 2 races, but that's a whole different story. So yeah, Max Verstappen was not a happy camper today. He was, like I said, we have not seen this Max Verstappen in a long time. I would probably say he has not been this heated over the team radio since 2021, I want to say, when he was in the championship fight with Hamilton. So definitely shows that Max still has that part of him where he can be very arrogant and very headstrong. He's like, if I just force my way through it, it's going to work, type of thing. But, so yeah, there's that. And I'm just going to say this real quick. Whenever Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton are within 5 seconds of each other on the track, it is always going to be action. There's always going to be some form of contact. There's always going to be some form of moves, because they both have a mutual respect for each other, but deep down, Hamilton is so bitter and so upset about what happened in 2021 that he'll never see Max the same. Like, he genuinely probably hates Max, but has a respect for him, because Max is one of the greatest drivers in the world right now. So, but yeah, whenever they share the same part of the track, there's always going to be contact. There's always going to be fireworks. It's always going to be entertaining. And God, before Hamilton retires, I just want one more season of it being Hamilton and Verstappen and them just duking it out every single race. That would be so good. But we have something even better with McLaren showing up to Hungary and pretty much making amends for what happened in Silverstone, which we'll hop onto that shortly. But yeah, After turn one, Piastri was leading. Verstappen gave the place back to Norris, so it was a McLaren 1-2. Piastri was, I think, before like the first round of pit stops, he was like 5 seconds ahead of Norris, and he was like managing his pace pretty well. Some other talking points, I mean, with Russell and Perez starting on the hards, going long, they kind of jumped the people that started on the softs and came in very early to switch out the tires. But yet, Perez and Russell weren't really making making up that much time as a lot of people thought. And because people were thinking like maybe they could get a P6, P7 area. Because they were stuck behind, I think they were stuck behind Valtteri Bottas and then Yuki Tsunoda before they came into the pits. And Perez, I don't know if it was his call or the team call, but he came in early because he was stuck behind Russell to fit on the mediums and pretty much jumped Russell. And that move was able to have him finish ahead of Russell. So, I mean, Perez did get points from P17, but they weren't as many points as Red Bull needs, because after this race, Red Bull is only, I believe it's like 55 points ahead of McLaren. That is not a lot. That's a little over 2 race wins ahead. And if McLaren keep this form up, that point difference is going to dwindle drastically. And Red Bull are going to need Perez up in the top 5 every single race. But man, it's going to be tough. But yeah, and then there's this kind of like slow part of the race where nothing really was happening. People were just managing their tires, so on and so forth. But then we jump to the last round of pit stops. And this is where, at least for this podcast, the majority of the talking is going to take place. Hamilton came in to put on the hards to do an undercut, and McLaren were afraid that undercut that Hamilton did was going to put Norris in a situation of possibly losing second. And, McLaren is all about, or at least right now, it's just all about a 1-2, maximum points and so on and so forth. So at this point, the running order was Piastri was in P1, Norris was in P2. And they gave Norris, they pretty much pitted Norris first before Piastri. And typically, I mean, it's not a written rule, but 9 times out of 10, whichever driver is in front of the other one gets the decision on the pit strategy and all that. Like, they get the first decision. But this time, McLaren's like, we need to kind of cover off Hamilton, so we'll go ahead and pit Norris and then Piastri. This is where McLaren's pit wall was definitely starting to sweat a little bit, because with that undercut, not only did Norris cover off Hamilton, Verstappen, and Leclerc, but he was also able to jump Piastri. And I believe this was like around lap 50-ish, where Norris, after Piastri made his pit stop, Piastri came out behind Norris. I think it was like around like a 3-second gap between the two. And, pretty quickly, the McLaren team pretty much told Norris, like, hey, keep looking after your tires because, you are still struggling with tire wear. But at some point within the next 20 plus laps of racing, we would like you to give the position back to Oscar, because at this point Oscar had at this point, Oscar did everything right. He got off the line pretty much perfectly to where he was able to make a move down the inside into turn 1 on lap 1 on Norris and take the lead. And not only did he take the lead, but he was able to extend the gap. So he had pretty good pace over Norris. Granted, that was while Norris was trying to overtake Verstappen, but once Norris did overtake Verstappen, the gap pretty much stabilized to where it was still around I want to say a 4.5 to 5 second gap between the two McLarens. And, Piastri was controlling that race. He was in charge of that race. He did make one mistake where he ran a little bit wide and got onto the gravel, which dirtied up his tires and made him lose a little bit of time. But other than that, small mistake, he was doing everything perfectly. He was, because we know that Piastri typically but he takes too much life out of the tires too fast, and it kind of suffers his pace in the second half of the race. But during this race, he was actually doing really well on, what's the word? He was doing really well on just preserving his tires, keeping them in a nice working area, not overdoing it type of thing. So Piastri was doing everything perfectly, on his side, except for that one little mistake, and, so on and so forth. So back to pretty much, like I said, McLaren told Norris, hey, from this point on until the end of the race, we want you guys to switch positions. And that's always a difficult call for a team, especially for a team that is on the up and they know they have a race-winning car and they have both drivers at a 1-2. You're pretty much deciding on who wins the race, and it's clearly never an easy decision to make. And we never really knew what Norris was going to do, because after the team asked him to switch the positions at some point throughout the race, because they were still under threat from Verstappen, because Verstappen was pretty quick on the mediums compared to Lewis's hards, but Verstappen was getting held up by Hamilton. So they did have a little bit of gap, but they didn't want to lose too much racing time to where they thought if Norris really slowed down and gave up 5 seconds of racing time, that he could possibly lose the second place to Max Verstappen if he got through Hamilton. But then obviously the contact happened and so on and so forth. So that kind of changed things a little bit. But for the next 15 to 20 laps of the race, so from the last pit stops to the very end, we had conversations between both McLaren drivers and their engineers. And it's very interesting because because McLaren wanted Lando to do the right thing, obviously. Because, this hasn't been confirmed or anything, but before the race, McLaren kind of had a talk about, whoever is in front after a certain amount of laps will win the race if we have the option to keep them to win, no matter what. And I'm guessing both drivers agreed to that. I have no idea, but I'm guessing. Excuse me, my throat's getting a little parched. So, McLaren definitely have a problem on their hands, because at this point, Norris is not only keeping the gap from him to Piastri, he is extending it by a decent amount. At this point of the race, Norris obviously had the most pace, or had more pace compared to Piastri, and was pulling away from Piastri. And the team kept coming on the radio and kind of like trying to persuade Norris, like, look, you know. Well, Norris also said, like, well, why should I give up the position if I'm the one that's, you know, taking the fight to Max, right? You know, I'm taking points off of Max Verstappen, so why would I give up points? Don't you want a driver's championship type of thing? But his race engineer came back on and was like, yes, we do, but you also have to think about, if you do this, you are going to have to, for the rest of the time that you are teammates, you're going to have to look at Oscar, look him in the eye, and pretty much say, I robbed you of your first win. And having that in a team, especially a team that is very much on the up, and having that friction is very dangerous. I mean, look back at, God, there's so many examples. Look at Mercedes with Rosberg and Hamilton. You saw how that friction worked and where it blew up and pretty much cost them a lot of points. And pretty much Norris's engineer's like, you know, you're going to have to deal with this. Like, every single, you know, meeting, every single team meeting, every single PR event, whatever, you're going to have to look at him, and in the back of your mind, you're going to have that thought of, I just took your first race win, even though the team told me to switch positions. And at one point, like, it was funny, at one point, like, it was very early on in this whole, like, team radio debacle, but, like, Norris's race engineer came on, and he was like, Lando, radio check? And then I was like, oh yeah, I'm still here. Like, he's like, I'm hearing every single thing you're saying right now, but I'm choosing not to say anything back. Because at this point, Norris is probably still trying to figure out what he wants to do while he's racing. And it's crazy how his mind has that capacity to do that lap after lap. But yeah. And then on Piastri's side, you know, his race engineer was pretty much telling Piastri, like, look, don't worry about Norris. We will handle him. You keep doing your thing, and we will make it right. And, you know, Piastri came on, and he's like, being just how Piastri is. No matter how much pressure or stress he's in or under, he's so just calm, collective, and he comes on the radio, he's like, yeah, okay. But then he also said, the longer you wait, the harder it's going to get, or the riskier it's going to get. And he's exactly right. Because the team have told both drivers that they, at some point in the remaining of the race, are going to switch positions. So both drivers know what is going on. It's not like they're trying to hide it from one driver or another. Both drivers know. So it is very, very, very cut and dry with, if you don't give up this position, it is on you, aka the driver. It's not on the team, it's on the driver. So, yeah, both drivers knew what was going on. And, you know, Norris's engineer kept coming on the radio and was like, I don't want to say pleading, but he's like, remember all the Sunday mornings and all of this, like, he is your teammate after all. And, you know, in order to win not only a driver's championship and a constructor's championship, you have to have a teammate. You have to have a teammate that is willing to help you and help the team. Because if the driver isn't willing to help the team, then the team isn't willing to help anyone, pretty much. So it's teamwork. And up until this point, you know, over the last year and a half that Oscar has been with McLaren, whenever there's been team orders, Oscar has always done it. He's never really complained. He's never really thrown a fit or anything. And keep in mind, Norris has done that as well. You know, there's been times where Norris also got out of the way of Piastri. So they've both been very respectful to each other. So, but this is, at this very point, is where the relationship was either going to still continue to be okay and still like flourish into a healthier friendship, or it was going to wilt away, kind of like what happened with Hamilton and Rosberg. And for the longest time, I honestly thought that Norris was not going to give the position back to Oscar, because Norris was just, extending the gap lap after lap to where it was up to like 6 seconds at one point. And I genuinely thought that Norris was not going to give the position up, because if I was in Norris's position, it's difficult because, you're a racing driver. You've been in F1 for almost 6 years now. And, you've had to wait so long for your first victory. And, even in 2021, when McLaren had that 1-2, Norris was still second because he could have won that race, but the team told him to hold his positions so Ricciardo could win. That was one time where he was robbed from a win by the team. And, he's also had multiple times where he could have won the race, but mistakes and so on and so forth. So he's been with this team, obviously his whole F1 career. So he, I would probably think that Norris sees himself as the driver that's going to take them to great places, that he is their driver, their number one driver. And all of a sudden, you have this teammate that comes in, not even a full 2 years at the team, and is not only performing very well, but has shown that he can win a race. He won the sprint, and, he has the pace and all that. And the team are favoring Oscar. So I get it. Like I said, I honestly thought Norris was not going to let him by. I really thought that Norris was going to look out for himself, was just going to cross the line, have it at that. But surprisingly, Norris did slow down and let Piastri by. Was that the right call? In my opinion, yes, it was the right call. And see, I think this is where Norris kind of like finally broke to let Piastri by, is the team came on the radio and they weren't like asking him or anything. They gave him a direct order. He's like, give the position back to Oscar now. And within the next lap or two, Norris did. So I think Norris was kind of like stringing them along a little bit. And I think he was also trying to prove a point like that, he could have won that race easily. But I think he was also waiting for them to actually give him a direct order. It was like, you have to let him back by. So, yeah. I think Norris kind of strung them along a little bit. But, it is what it is. It is really interesting to watch it all kind of like come together. And, excuse me. And it was definitely a very interesting part, or a very interesting end to the race. But deep down that, hold on. Let me go back to what I was saying about, was it the right move? I personally think it was, because not only did Piastri take the lead on lap 1 and continue to hold the lead throughout the race until the last final round of pit stops, to where McLaren gave the pit strategy preference to Lando over Oscar that was in the lead. I think it was the right call to switch the positions, because Oscar, like I said earlier, Oscar did nothing wrong. Granted, was he faster than Lando that last stint? No, but he was faster than Lando throughout the rest of the race. And honestly, I think if they gave that pit stop strategy or that pit stop preference to Oscar, he would have came out in front of Lando and would have won the race. But they were wanting, or they quote unquote had to like cover off Hamilton and Verstappen with Norris, which then put them in this place where there's or they had to deal with the whole kind of like team order things. So my throat is very dry. I apologize. But that was very interesting. And after they gave him like a direct order, they weren't like trying to persuade him to do the right thing. They gave him the order. Then Norris was like, okay, I'll give it up. I'll be the team player, and so on and so forth. But you know that since Norris had his first win in Miami, he wants every single win he can take. And letting this one go definitely hurts. And I mean, ever since Miami, Norris could have easily won more than just one race. And knowing that now his teammate has won a race, it's going to hurt. It's a bittersweet moment. Because, Oscar and Orlando are pretty good friends. They're pretty good mates. They get along pretty well. And, yeah, I think this may add a little friction to the relationship, but not as much as if they were, actually, both fighting for the Drivers' Championship. So it definitely will hurt Norris, and I definitely think that he will not enjoy this. It will leave a bad taste in his mouth. I honestly think that Norris, not necessarily is second guessing McLaren, but is just there's probably a thought in the back of his head that maybe, just maybe, they are preferring Oscar over Norris, but I mean that could just be completely wrong. So who knows? The only person that definitely knows what is going through Lando Norris's mind right now is Lando Norris. But yeah, huge congrats to Oscar Piastri, his first F1 Grand Prix win. We knew it was coming, ever since his rookie year last year, where he was very impressive. We knew it was going to be a matter of time before he stood on that top step. I don't think he enjoyed it as much as he would have if the team got involved, or if the team didn't get involved. So where, if he actually hunted down Norris and passed him on track fairly, I think he would have enjoyed this, first win a lot more than having the team kind of give it to him in a way. So, but, I mean, nonetheless, I bet Oscar is extremely happy right now with, winning in Formula One and making the decision to leave Alpine and go to McLaren, because if he stuck with Alpine, he would be dead fucking last right now. But he won the race, and yeah, so on and so forth. Yeah. And then another record-breaking weekend for Lewis Hamilton. He is the only driver to have ever stood on 200 podiums throughout his career. 200 podiums. That is insanity. No other driver has done that. And it is just crazy that Lewis Hamilton just keeps breaking records, and he probably will keep breaking records. What else? I mean, that was pretty much the main thing, was the whole Norris and Piastri situation. And there will obviously be a debrief, and they'll probably, Norris and Piastri may even have like a one-on-one conversation and be like, look, kind of like hash things out. But there could be some more friction later on the season, and that's going to be very interesting to see. Another note about Max Verstappen, this race, or that move on Hamilton, he just seemed so immature about that that move. Sorry, someone's motions detected at my front door. But that move that he made on Hamilton, in my opinion, that was a very immature move. And that was a very hot-headed move. And we haven't seen that side of Max Verstappen, like I said, in a long time. He, at that moment, that was the original Max Verstappen that came into F1 where I'm going to send it. And if there's contact, there's contact. I'm going to, he's going to be like, well, he was always like, no matter what, I'm just going to send it and see what happens type of thing. So that move on Hamilton was definitely desperate, in my opinion. I think it kind of definitely showed what type of day he was having. And, it would not surprise me at the end of, or after the debrief with the stewards and all that, he does get a penalty. And like I said earlier, how the fuck did neither one of them get damage? Like, Verstappen's rear end was, I'd probably say 6 or 7 feet up in the air, and then gets slammed onto the fucking ground. And he keeps going like nothing happened. Like, how is that not gearbox damage? Or even like floor damage, or a diffuser damage? Like, yeah. How there was no damage to either one of the cars was honestly very impressive. But, man, that's crazy. Some other notes. Hold on here. Let me look up the results. That way I can go down the list and, comment everything. So obviously we have Oscar Piastri winning. We have Lando Norris coming in second. Lewis Hamilton in third. Leclerc was able to achieve a fourth position. Max finished fifth on track, but I would assume that he would get a penalty, which would drop him down to sixth. Then comes Carlos Sainz. Perez was able to claw back and get some points by finishing seventh. Same with Russell. Tsunoda was able to get ninth, and then Stroll was the final driver in the points. Then comes Alonso, Ricciardo, Hülkenberg, Albon, Magnussen, Valtteri, Sargent, Ocon, Zhou, and then Gasly. Probably not the best weekend for Sauber, or Stake F1, whatever you want to call them, because they did bring a lot of upgrades this weekend, and Zhou finished last, and Valtteri was 16th, so definitely not the weekend that Stake was really looking for. Same with Williams. I guess this track doesn't really fit Williams, but even then, Albon did pretty well in Monaco. He scored points in Monaco, but either way, what happened to Sargent? Because when the race started, Sargent was right next to Albon, and he got dropped all the way down to 17th. Wow. Both Hasses, not really a good showing. Daniel Ricciardo, Aston Martin isn't really there. You could also tell that on the radios that Fernando Alonso is not happy with Aston Martin, that when he re-signed with Aston Martin, he was thinking that they were going to be higher up, but clearly not. And then, yeah, both Alpines were just nowhere. I mean, Gasly obviously was in the pits because he retired. Albon finished 14th, so nothing too crazy there. But Tsunoda did get 2 points, which that's pretty good. Not too bad. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, it would not surprise me if Verstappen does get a penalty, which will drop him. But, yeah, definitely a very different race than what it was last at Silverstone. Because Silverstone was definitely a lot of on-track battling, but this race was a lot of drama over team radios, I guess. But all in all, I would say it was a pretty good race. I mean, it's always hard to overtake at the Hungary. That's why it's kind of like nicknamed Monaco without walls. It's so difficult because as soon as you get within like that 1 to 1.5 second gap to the car in front with the turbulent air, like all of your like performance and like aerodynamics and all of that kind of just like it gets so affected. It's so difficult to really get a move. Like the only really major overtaking spot is turn 1. So, but all in all, I would say it was a pretty solid race. Could have been worse. There's been Hungary races that have been very boring. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that's everything I really wanted to talk about. I did mention that Oscar probably doesn't. I mean, he'll take this win. Obviously, you know, it's his first win. He'll take whatever he can get. But it's probably kind of like bittersweet because, like, in my opinion, if I have worked my entire life to win an F1 race, I would rather want it to be won on track than kind of get it handed to me. It wasn't even handed to him. It was just influenced by the team. I mean, he did all the hard work in 3/4 of the race, so you know he deserved that win. But kind of a, like I said, a bittersweet moment at the at the end of the race. So, but yeah, we knew sooner or later he was going to win a race. It was just a matter of time. And I also just want to take a moment to say this: we are having a season that I think no one was expecting. In the last 12 or 13 races, there's been 7 different winners. What? Especially after Bahrain when Max won by, I forget, like 20 or 30 seconds. We're like, oh, here comes another Red Bull dominant season. No. Red Bull's performance and upgrades have been nowhere. And that's another thing I kind of want to touch upon. I think there's some friction really starting to rub together with Verstappen and Red Bull. Because you can tell that Verstappen is not happy with Red Bull. And that obviously the Red Bull is no longer the fastest car on the grid. And Verstappen has kind of covered that up by him dragging that car up. So maybe, I mean, we look at Perez's P7. I mean, granted, he had a bad qualifying, but maybe that is where the Red Bull's at. I mean, I wouldn't say like below Ferrari. I would probably say McLaren's the fastest, obviously, and then Mercedes is very close to Red Bull. I'd probably say Red Bull still number 2, but then comes Mercedes and Ferrari. But Red Bull, they're starting to slip, and they're starting to slip hard. And if they don't get their act together, they could easily lose not only the Drivers' Championship with Max, but the Constructors. I mean, granted, Red Bull needs Perez to be there no matter what, and he's not. And McLaren are now within very close striking distance of taking over that Constructors' Championship lead. And I bet it's definitely, putting some wear and tear on some of the people in the Red Bull team. Because I bet they were not expecting for teams to catch them up this fast. Compared to last year, because I think over the broadcast, I heard Crofty say that at this time last year, the points gap between Red Bull and the rest of the field was like 200 points compared to where it's a little over 50 points now. Like, you have to take a moment and step back and look at what, Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren, and I mean, hell, even some of like the lower teams like Haas and maybe even Aston Martin have done to close that gap to Red Bull. From last year to this year, last year Red Bull were untouchable. Max won the Constructors' Championship by himself. That's how dominant that team was, how dominant that car was. Compared to this year, they are nowhere near the performance they were at last year. Either they haven't been upgrading as much, or other teams have just been finding performance and pace race after race, that they are closing that gap to Red Bull significantly. It's definitely something to keep an eye on because, yeah, like I said, or I think I heard Crofty right, that at this point last year, Red Bull were ahead by 200 points in the Constructors' Championship, and now they're only ahead by 55 points. That's 3 race wins. Which, I mean, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but when Red Bull are man down and McLaren are getting, 1 and 2s and podiums after podiums, those points start adding up, and Red Bull really needs a second driver. And like I said, that's my opinion on that whole situation. But yeah, it's not looking good for Red Bull or anyone like that. So okay, sorry, I just saw a message on Discord saying, when Lando loses the title by like 10 points, he can thank McLaren for it. Okay, dude. In my opinion, that is bullshit because, I don't know. Because Oscar took over the lead, lap 1, controlled the whole race up until the last pit stops where McLaren preferenced Norris's pit stop before Piastri that was in the lead. I mean, what? I don't know. But I will say this. If Red Bull and Max Verstappen don't start, or if that friction between the two of them gets more and more aggravated, I can definitely see Lando and McLaren sneaking their way into a championship. Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, Oscar is also there, but Lando has been on form the last few races to where Lando he's been bringing in the points a lot more than Oscar. I mean, and that's not saying that Oscar hasn't been bringing in any points, because Oscar's been in very good form as well. Because there's been multiple races where Oscar could have easily won, but Lando has been able to achieve those higher finishes and so on and so forth. So, definitely interesting. Definitely very interesting. But in my opinion, like I said, I think McLaren made the right call. I think that was the right call. I know it's going to hurt Lando. I know he's going to be upset about it. But, on the other hand, that just gives him more motivation to make sure that never happens again, to where he needs to be in front of Oscar all the time, to where McLaren don't have to make those decisions. Also, how have I not mentioned that this front row, this race with Oscar and Lando, is the youngest front row in F1 history? That's pretty fucking cool. Like, what? But, yeah. What a season, dude. I love F1. Like, over the last few races, I mean, I've said this in previous podcasts, but over the last few races, F1 has been so amazing. And, coming off of an absolute bore fest of Red Bull dominance to this, I could not ask for a better season, honestly. And this is where true F1 fans are shown, because the whole drama with 2021, F1 fucking exploded in popularity, and everyone's like, oh, this is gonna be like every season is gonna come down to the last race. But clearly not. And I think over the last few years, with Red Bull being so dominant, those fans that came into the sport in the 2021 season have kind of like died down, and the true F1 fans that have been through the seasons, like the past seasons, are getting rewarded with an absolute crazy season. I mean, it would not surprise me that we have more winners, or like different winners throughout the season. Fuck. Well, don't want to get ahead of myself, but maybe even Paris could win a race. I don't know. Probably not. Because what? Verstappen has won a race. Both McLarens have. Both Mercedes have. Both Ferraris have, right? Hasn't Sainz? Yeah, both Ferraris have. So, I mean, who fucking knows? Who knows? Maybe after the summer break, when either Ricciardo or Tsunoda gets bumped up to Red Bull, maybe their first race with the team, they fucking win. Who knows, dude? This season has been so different compared to last season. It's so refreshing, and this is why I fell in love with motorsport, if I can talk. This right here is why I have fallen in love with it, and I love it so much, dude. But on that note, my voice is getting kind of shot, and we are getting close to an hour, so I think I have pretty much summed up the whole race altogether fairly well. I've given my thoughts on different key points of the race and so on and so forth, so I will end your suffering shortly, and yeah, I do appreciate you guys listening, watching, so on and so forth. It does mean a lot. Make sure to keep an eye out for my ACC race review. It should be coming out either today or tomorrow. And yeah, F1 is in a good place. F1 is love. F1 is life. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day in the Great West. You can tell that I'm getting tired of talking because I'm mumbling and messing up my words. You folks have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you all in the next one.